Morning. Glad to see some people again. My name, for everyone who doesn't know yet, is Ed Wilhelm. I work for 21st Century Software. Prior to that, I worked for IBM for about 35 years. Was mostly worked in the VSEn change team and worked level 2 support last several years. For any of you who think, oh, I've never seen this guy, but his voice sounds so familiar, it might be if you go and Google VSE 50th anniversary video, you'll find the video that we put together at the lab to celebrate the 50th anniversary of VSE. Okay, 50th anniversary, and this was several years ago. Okay, and you'll see that I was the narrator for that video, and so I was almost famous. Okay, didn't bring me anything, but it was a fun project. Today I would like to talk about VSEn and IBM Synergies, of course, because this is a VM workshop. And what I'd like to do is start off with some pretty basic stuff. Some of the screenshots might not exactly fit to your configuration, but the considerations are going to be the same. Then I'd like to go into pretty much the standard stuff we talk about with VSE and VM interfacing with each other. And then I'd like to go into some exotic stuff that you may never run into, or some stuff that my boss said, these guys aren't going to be interested in this. But I'm a geek, and so I like some of the stuff that I'm going to show you, and you guys might find some of it interesting. Okay. Doesn't like to scroll down like that. Of course, VSE can run under guest. I might have some VM versions up here that are no longer even supported, but any VM system that's supported, we will run under. And I had a younger, too bad I don't see him in the audience today, but I had a younger new colleague that was saying, I saw 2 terminal sessions for your VSE. I don't really understand, obviously a new VSE user, but I'd like to say usually standard, you can log on to a VSE system that's running on top of VM and get the console, the standard VSE console, and you can dial into a VSE system that's up and running and get an, I'm going to say OLTP, but you all are going to hear KICS terminal. And that's where you can use our interactive user interface. But you can also log on to a VM system that is also, or a VM user ID that's also running under the same VM that VSE is running on. And you can interact with the VSE system itself through your VM user ID. So I'll talk a little bit about that. Okay. This is from IBM's Personal Communications Manager. That's a Reeves standard for terminal emulation. One of the things I had always worked in the lab and always had a pre-configured system, and always thought that, okay, we have a. Let me see if I can bring it up here. Maybe I have to turn off the laser pointer. Turn. Oh, it's stuck here. You didn't tell me that would happen, Shane. This is a VSEn main menu, and when you press PF3 to sign out, it brings you back to the logon panel, and down at the bottom you'll see PF3 to go back to VM. And if you didn't have that little check mark to reconnect your terminal session, it doesn't do anything. It just, you get a blank screen and you have to reconnect. And we thought for a while, because I said my systems that I used when I was at IBM were already configured for me, and we thought, oh, we're missing something. There has to be something on our VM user ID that has to be there in order for that to reconnect, and then we realized it was just a part of our terminal emulator, so that's why I bring that up.
You never had your hardware down then for a long time, once you try to connect over and over and over and over, have you?
No.
Okay.
Okay. You mean if I have that on and it keeps trying to reconnect and stuff?
Right, if you're bouncing your CPU or something, it starts doing funny stuff.
Okay. Back to the presentation. Pointer back up. Okay, that was the only reason I brought that up. It had us confused for a little while. Okay, the next thing is that I'd like to mention is that IBM, when they put together ZVSE, they based everything on the host code page 037. And I don't know how many of you have had any problems with host code page problems, but we previously had no real optional products at IBM where we were doing VSE, and so we always just happily used code page 037 and never really worried about it until we got the optional product C, the C compiler, and then realized that the C compiler standard uses the host code page 1047 to understand the square brackets. And so all of our header files are when we put them on the system, and none of them were working, and they all had the wrong symbols in them. And then we realized, oh, C uses 1047. Our OMA file previously, or ZVSE's OMA file used 037, and it had square brackets in it also. But we've now converted all of our messages that had square brackets in them to code page 1047. So if you're going to use a code page to display EBCDIC in a terminal emulator and you want to use VSE, I recommend using the 1047. We might move to I think there's a 920 something that has a euro symbol in it additionally. We might move to that sometime. Right now. And also wanted to mention down at the bottom there about IBM's LPAR for the high-level language assembler. The IBM LPAR is the PH5019. 21st Century also has an LPAR for high-level language assembler. To correct this exact problem, they realized there was no way to specify which code page you were writing your assembler in, and it was translating it into the wrong EBCDIC code and having problems with the assembler. So they now have a way to specify which code page that your assembler program is written in, and we have also taken that apart and provided from 21st Century also. And I believe there's another LPAR also for high-level language assembler that also is a follow-on to this one that even improves that. So, I want to talk about two things that will make your life easier. If you set up any kind of file transfer definitions in your host transfer, this is of course the $IND transfer, host transfer. It's not FTP. There's two kinds of transfers that we use lots, and one of them is fixed binary 80, and the other is fixed binary for dumps. It's our standard dump size is 4112, and if you have something set up so that you know when you're transferring dumps, or when you're transferring let's say a phase or a PTF, to your VSE systems. These are two definitions that you might want to have already set up on your system. Okay, you didn't see any of this going on when Shaheen installed and when Shaheen did a fast service upgrade, but he had already done all this. And this is something that before you IPL your system, you should set up the VM where you're going to IPL your VSE with these commands so that your VSE console looks its best. First of all, to do set run on, which means if it ever goes into CP mode that your console or VSE is still running in the background. You set up a spool of your reader only for the Class A files. You determine how large of a storage you can use. I say 4 gig. That was working good for us. And very important is to set up your console mode to 3270. Otherwise, you come up in line mode. There are some out there that still like line mode and prefer it, but I recommend the 3270. You can scroll backwards in 3270 and you can't in line mode. And the terminal break-in minimal is something that's not really documented anywhere, but that prevents some of the messages to come up on your console and interrupt your console operations. I recommend that also. Okay, and this is all, like I said, basic stuff. Doesn't have anything right now yet to talk about talking to VM. Now I want to talk about a little bit about paging. Since IBM VM5, and we're way beyond that, we only run, VSE only runs in under VM in a V equals V virtual mode. And what that means is you should not try to set up paging in VSE because VM will already provide paging for you. And so if you have paging going on in VM and paging going on in VSE, you get double paging. We recommend that you turn off paging in VSE with the no PDS. Our standard environments, if you just install a standard environment A, B, or C, they all come with page data sets. And you can get rid of them and run without paging if you run like this. Okay. When VSE is first installed, it does an automatic detect of all the hardware that's either directly attached or assigned to it under in the VM directory. Before you install VSE, you should try to have all the devices that you want to use attached to let it automatically detect them. You saw during the installation of Shaheen's 6.3 that some devices are detected and VSE can't really determine what they are, and you have to further define them in the hardware configuration right after installation. But most of the devices are sensed and will be properly defined in hardware. In the hardware configuration, you can, of course, go back in afterwards and delete devices. You can add devices. For virtual tape, for instance, you're going to want to add devices that you don't have assigned under VM and there is no real tape, but you want to have a device CUU numbers, so you go ahead and define that device to VSE, and then you can later on use it as a virtual tape. Okay, it also recommends what disks to take down before you install VSE. If you have the make disks and everything, VSE will see them, and you don't normally want to have that happen. Okay. If you're running VSE on VM, there is not just the VSE, the normal standard VSE console, and another console that you can run on a interactive user interface. There's also another console that you don't see that's called the VMCF console that you can actually interact with from VM, and it doesn't put any output onto your VSE console, which can be kind of convenient because then you can do things like debugging from VM and debug some of your VSE stuff without having lots of debug diagnostic stuff show up on your VSE console, which might confuse operators. So you can do some debugging and stuff on the VMCF console. I'll try to show a little bit about that in the demo. We have Skeleton in Library 59 to add that support. I'll talk about that in a second. And after you've submitted that, you can use the VSE command to send any VSE command that you would normally do on the console. You can send it from your VM user ID to a VSE system and get the response sent back to your VM. So actually, you can automate your entire console interaction from a VM system if you really wanted to. Depends on how far you want to take that.
Does that include IPL?
I haven't ever tried that. To try to have a re-IPL command, I haven't really ever tried that. We could try it today. And this is the requirements that you have to have if you're going to run with VSE on top of VM, and you still want to use the virtual VM console facility. The default value for this is yes if it's a VM guest, and it's no if you're running on LPAR, and it's ignored if you're not running under VM. So, but it's required to be on in your IPL procedure. Let's see. I talked about the interface is a set of phases that we supply. And these phases, you need to run that skeleton, which basically will send the phases to your VM user ID of choice, and then you get it sent to your reader, and you receive them to your A drive, it'll default to the first writable mini disk that you have on your VM system, and then what we did is we only did it one time, and we share a tools disk, and everybody has the exits and the phases available on their VM system. Okay, and these are some of the things that you can do to interface between VM and VSE. You can have some of the messages from a job go to your VM system. You can have all of the messages go to the VM user ID. You can reply. You can provide replies for any outstanding job that's waiting for a reply on the VSE console. Submit jobs from a VM guest system to your VSE. We do this all the time. Some shops only like to submit from ICCF. Our experience is to use the easiest way possible, and some stuff we submit with Navigator, some stuff we submit from VM, and some stuff we do from, depending upon what kind of job. Is it a skeleton? Does it have to be adapted? Or is it just something that I have set up and I run every time the exact same way, and I may just have it sitting in on my CMS mini disk and just submit it straight to the system. There's also a way in job control, I'll show that later, how you can have from a particular job, have the messages from that job also show up on on your CMS user ID. That way you can kind of track what's going on. I'll show you some examples of that. Also, we can issue any CP commands, which, I mean, I guess if I'm saying that, I guess because your IPL has a CP level, you can read IPL. I guess we have done that, haven't we? I mean, we have re-IPL from a VM system to the VSE system to re-IPL. This is the skeleton. I talked about it previously, SKVM VSE in library 59. It punches a couple of modules and explains and exits to your VSE, from the VSE guest system to your VM machine, and it shows up in your reader, and then you receive it. And in order for that to work, you have to have your power punch writer set up to go to VM with that pstart command. Okay, this is just the way to use it. Copy the skeleton into your library. You change the parameter, the variable v001 to the CMS user ID that's on the same, has to be on the same VM system, and then you run the job, and it sends it punches off everything you need to your VM user ID. These are just some warnings about if you have user IDs in LPARs and on VM, you shouldn't use the same names. Would confuse where the routing is supposed to go. And you could, once you have the, it says you should access the CMS mini disk where you want the routines to be loaded, but it'll try to put them on the first read-write mini disk that's available. And I said again, the IPL sys command mcf equals yes has to be in your IPL, and that's a default. So if once you've installed, it should be set to that. Okay, the command that you get. I guess I can show you the commands that you get when you do that. This is my CMS user ID, and on our tools disk. Okay, what you're just seeing now are messages that, because I had set up my connector server job to send me, my CMS user, messages when someone connects through the connector server to my VSE systems. I can see I have someone connected to my 14 and someone connected to my 15 system through the connector server, and the user ID that connected, and what the IP address. The IP address is going to be the same for both of these because I'm using LFP via, which just uses port numbers, so it's using the same IP address. Let's see, the one is submit. This is the exec that you get that submits jobs. And there's your command. Get a module and an explain file that would help you use it if you don't know how to use it. I can show you like a job that I use to set up my connector server on the 14, the PTH VSE 14 system. And if you see up here on the job control, I have echo equals all, which means all messages from this job and any messages that this job wants to submit will go to my user ID. And that was what we just saw before. Someone was connecting to, through the connector server, and it was because of this echo equals in the job control why I get messages sent back to my VM user ID. And the VSE command. And in order to get that job to run on my VSE system, I also use this sub VSE. I send it directly from here to that system to set up my connector server. But another thing that you can do is this. I'm gonna do it over this. I can do a redisplay of what was on the console on VM. On VSE from VM, I can say which VSE user I want to see and how many lines. Okay, and this is now showing me what was on my console, the last 33 lines that were on my console. So I can basically also scroll backwards from VM. I can see what was going on my VSE without having to log in. And you can see I was playing around looking at console status and displaying active tasks. I can also do exactly the same thing. I can do a display active tasks, DA, and it sends all the active tasks that are running on my VSE system back to my VM system. And if we go and look at the console, you'll see that none of that showed up over here. The redisplay, none of that showed up over here because those commands were going to the VM console that runs in the background and doesn't interrupt with any of the console activity that's going on my VSE console. Okay. So that was kind of a demonstration where you can do the VSE command. You can also do CP commands. You can do a asterisk CP query Dusty if you want to see what Dusty are available to your VSE machine. You can see that from VM. And I talked about you can submit the jobs directly from your VM machine to your VSE machine with the sub VSE command, and depending upon if you use the echo or echo U parameters in the job statement, will determine if any messages come back to your VM user ID. Okay, something that I also discovered while I was started working for 21st Century, because I had a system that was always set up for me at IBM, and we never, of course, turn on security to do any testing and stuff. I never had a system with security on, so I wasn't aware of the fact that you need to define the user ID that you want to use from CMS. You have to put it in your DT tab, and this is we actually added this now in our skeleton for DT SecTub. It wasn't in there on the IBM ZVSE. So I don't know if anybody was using any of this stuff with security on using the ZVSE system. But it's easy, you just add the user ID, and I don't think there's any password checking. That's why I even have password equals dummy. I just think it just checks to see, is this user defined in the DT tab, and does he have enough authority to be able to submit jobs and to be able to get echoed messages back, sent back. that this has to be set up also. Otherwise, what you get when you try to do you submit a job or you try to do a VSE command, it comes back and says unknown CMS user and no processing. Okay. I don't know if any of you run into that. You can also, with the AR command sysecho, you can say on your VSE console that you want all messages that show up on your console to be sent to a VM user ID, regardless of if the echo on or echo on the job control, the power job control is on. I don't use power job control very much, so almost none of my jobs had any power job control. I guess you use that mostly if you want to do accounting, power accounting. And so I didn't have, I was looking for a way to also get the messages sent to my VM user ID without using power job control. And you can just use the sysecho command and it will send everything to your VM. Okay, this is also the short form of this is how you use the VSE command. I mentioned you can do things like map and priority and any of the power commands to display your queue contents. You can delete members out of the queues. You can issue VTAM commands all through the VSE command. This is how you can check with the SIR command. I don't know, are you all familiar with the SIR command? It's kind of a recently documented command. Was first documented in our hits and tips, and then is now actually an official part of the system functions commands. And it will let you know what you can check to see what the status of the VMCF is, and you can turn it on and off using the SIR command. Another thing, another AR command that you can use is the core. Basically, if you want to know about the console router, to find out, it'll tell you how many consoles are currently active. You can also see what they would react to, like if they would react to alerts or some user input. What this command is also good for, if you're looking at the status, to see that if you do have the VMCF console up and running, if you're running under VM, and you'll see the VMC, see VMC up there. We have also the system console. If anyone is logged on to IUI and is currently using the interactive interface console, you'll also see the IC. And any of the consoles, some vendor products also will run their own console, and you'll be able to see them also. What this is also good for is if you're having a problem with one of your consoles, you might be able to use one of the other consoles to force that console off and back on again. So this is a way, if your console is hanging and you can't get back in, you can go to one of the other consoles, either the IUI console to force your interactive or your main console, or you can go even, it says here, you can use the VI, VMSG core command. You can go under VM and force one of the other consoles in CP. You can also force them off. Yeah, that's useful if you have a console hanging. Okay, now I'm finishing up pretty much with some of this. This is the standard interface stuff that we deliver with VSE, and now I want to talk a little bit about two things that we at 21st Century had to deal with real quick when we first started building VSE again, and we didn't have any valid keys for our TCP/IP stack at the beginning.
Sure.
And so we needed to test lots of stuff, and so we quickly went to look what else do we have, and found that we could do Linux FastPath by setting up you can see on the left-hand side of the picture that this is basically a way that you could talk to a Linux running on VM through hypersockets, but if you went through Linux FastPath, you didn't even have to go down to the hypersockets level. It was just, you were through the IUCV in VM. We talked directly from VSE directly to the, and what we did was we offloaded all the TCP/IP interface stuff to the Linux, and basically didn't have to have any TCP/IP stack running on our VSE itself. And we did that, and what we also did was this. We used what's called the VM IP Assist. They call it an appliance. It's on the firmware of the chip. You don't have to install Linux. Basically, you just have to IPL it, give it a couple of mini disks and IPL it from the firmware itself, and you have a Linux image up and running. And that's what you just saw. All my systems, I'm not running with a TCP/IP stack. I'm running with LFP through this VIA. So all the interaction with my navigator, all the if I do health check, or if I do FTP, if I do virtual tape server, it's all running through this, and I don't have any TCP/IP currently running on my.
So does VIA run on a CP or an IFL?
I think right here, I think it's running under VM. So whatever you have your VM running on, you can run. It's like running it's like running a guest on top of your VM, and you IPL from. I'm going to make it sound easy. You have to assign. I guess you have to have a VM profile, just like any other VM user ID, and you IPL from this VIA image, and it's like a pre-configured Linux in the firmware on the Zine chip.
Maybe just a note of that, I don't know if you show it later. This has been announced by IBM to be also end of service as of September 30th. So if you're interested or you're using this VIA, you would like to use VIA as to install a Linux on CVM, because that's the other option. You install a Linux with a Linux license, install FB, then you need to work with IBM that they continue to provide that with the KEC firmware as well.
What was that, 2030?
Sorry.
2030? This September.
That's the 30th.
Oh, I thought you were saying 2030. I was like, yeah, it works great. And it's a shame if it's going to go away, but and like I said, the backup is just to install a Linux as a guest, and you get an IFL, I think, still free for if you're running Linux on it. So we will talk to that, and you can offload your TCP/IP functionality to that. Okay, I'm not going to talk too much more about that. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about some exotic stuff that I liked. I had always been told that you could. We have Rex on VSE, and I'd always been told you can compile Rex on VM and run it on VSE, and I just took that at word, but I never tried it, and I didn't know how. And actually, then when I wanted to try it, I couldn't find any real good documentation on how to do it. So you guys might want to hold on to this presentation, because it might be the only place where it's really documented a couple of easy steps. Of course, we all know the advantages of using a compiler, and I'm going to show you maybe a little bit of what I got from compiling the program. What I did, because I wanted to see what kind of an impact what it even had if I compiled the Rex program on VM. I wrote a small little program to generate Fibonacci sequence, and I had a limitation because I was doing recursion, and Rex only lets you do like 250 levels of recursion and then it stops. So I could only generate 249 numbers. And of course, running that program, even in interpreted Rex, was like not even a blip on a Z system. And so then I started saying, okay, let's just put this in a big loop. And I looped it 100 times, and I looped it 1,000 times, and I looped it 9,000, and I still wasn't getting any blips. And I said, okay, let's just do this 10 million times. And so I ran 10 million times, and I finally got it. It took 2 minutes and 43 seconds to run this 10 million times. Okay, so that was something I could start with. And then to compile it, I took the same text, the same Rex code, uploaded it to VM, compiled it with the VM Rex compiler, and a trick is that you have to use these options, and I don't know where these are documented anymore, but you use those options, and what you get is a text deck, an 80 character text deck, because VSE needs, any objects have to be fixed 80. And you download that text deck as an OBJ file, fixed binary 80. And then you can, I use Navigator, you basically need to put that object in a library somewhere, of your choice. And then we provide what we provide is a procedure in IJSys sysres, which I don't know if it's documented anywhere, but it's called Rex Link, and if you look in there, we also have one called Rex P-Link, which is a pre-linker, and I think that's, I didn't get that far, but I think that's if you need to even add code to use CICS, or if you want to do other stuff like DB2 together, and you need to link other stuff in. So this is a pre-linker. What it basically does, what this linker did was it puts a stub on top of that object file, and that stub allows it to be loaded as a phase, and then it does whatever other magic it does to the linking. And what I have it here doing is it's pulling it out of the library that I put in, the sub-library I put it in, and it puts it back, I put it back into prd2.config because prd2.config was already in my phase list, so I didn't have to change any libdef statements. Let's see what else, and then the proc itself, I take it back, the proc is in prd1.base, not IJSys.syslib. So you have to set up there is no default proc libdef, so you have to set up the proc libdef so that it knows to look there to find the Rex link. But basically that's how you use it. And there are no examples of this, how to use this anywhere. So this is not like the only place you find it. And basically then when I want to run the job, the first time I ran it, I guess I didn't give an example of that. I had to say exec rex equals Fibonacci, and then I had to have a proc libdef for it to find the proc, the rex proc itself, and it interpreted it. But now I have it as a phase in my prd2.config, and it's going to just go and look for a phase called Fibonacci, and it's going to, I can set how many times I want to, 249 is the max there, but the 10 million, you can play around with this. I don't recommend you doing this on any systems that you are doing subcapacity, because that 2 minutes and 43 seconds put the CPU at like at least 92% CPU. So that would like kind of screw your statistics for a month. But this was the results I got. The interpreted version ran in 2 minutes, and the compiled version ran in 6 seconds. So yeah, and I thought, okay, I can go with this and tell you guys about this because I thought it was pretty good. And I don't know if anybody's using Rex86 out there, but this is a way to maybe squeeze some more out of your machine. Okay, the only thing that I found, which I was a little bit depressed about, is that this Rex IPT, which lets you do a whole bunch of automation of your console or automation of any other jobs, in that it'll put automatically all the commands up to the console and reply. That it cannot be used as a compiler program. That has to have the, in order to have the environment set up, it has to use the exec rex equals, and you can only use a proc. So, of course, the little sample that I have doesn't do any of the fancy JCL and replying to any of the replies that come out of the JCL. So if you want to use that, you have to use Rex IPT, but even that Rex IPT, I still think is a good way to automate lots of your consoles. So. Okay, we're out of a little bit of the exotic stuff. I want to talk about, getting close to the end here, I want to talk about Dusty sharing. We had some requests about can I share stuff between 6.2 and 6.3 while I'm still running on 6.2, and so of course I set up a system to share to see how. We didn't change anything, so I just want to make sure everything was still working. And we have the same scenario where you have to set up a log file that's shared between the two systems. We recommend that the log file reside on a virtual disk defined under VN. It's, of course, all in memory, so it's faster, so all the locking is faster. You have to add all the Dusty in our IPL hardware. Statements have to be added as with the share option, so that they, if any, I always go to that, don't have to go to the locking mechanism. The mini disks, that if you want to share mini disks between VSE systems under VM, they have to be defined with the MWV in your VM profile in order to be able to share between them. And all the VSE systems that are going to use them shared have to link them in the multiple way. No duplicate vol IDs. We all know what kind of, I don't know, you can get in lots of problems if you have duplicate vol IDs on a VSE system. And all the complications that you might run into if you have a resource locked and you can't get to it. You can solve some of it by shutting down all your systems and then doing an unlock of any of the locks are all done with CPU IDs. Every VSE guest that's sharing has to have its own CPU ID, and there's a way to do that, to do a set CPU ID if, in case. In our test environment, all our VSE guests all have the same CPU ID. So in order to set this up, I had to change the CPU ID for the VSE guests that wanted to share. Okay, that was just a little bit about Dusty sharing. And then the last couple of things I want to talk about are some possibilities that you have if you're running on VM and need to do some diagnosis, or if you want to display storage. There are lots of important VM CP commands that you can use to display storage. Of course, the IPL is to IPL your system, but There's also the possibility to set up your IPL disk as a standalone dump disk. And if you do that, every time you IPL from that, it will come up in standalone mode. In order to avoid that, you need to use the clear command at the end, which basically says ignore the standalone utilities that are in this disk and just IPL in a normal manner. But you can set up any system disk. You don't have to have an extra disk just to do standalone utilities or to make a standalone dump disk. Like I said, displaying storage, displaying PSWs, can cause an external interrupt with the XT command. And the store status command is also important. If you are running under VM and you need to take a standalone dump, you need to do the store status prior to taking your standalone dump. It's in our documentation. But these are just some of the CP commands that are pretty important in the VSE world. And other things, I don't know how many of you ever had to do any tracing under on VM of a VSE system, and there's absolutely phenomenal capability of tracing branches, tracing instructions, tracing storage alterations. You can set up all of this and follow any of the, if you're having problems with the program and want to know, or getting a storage overlay and want to know who's doing it, these are the commands that you can use to find. These are the kind of commands that the level 2 people would come and be asking you to use for getting diagnostic information for anything that they need. So basically, that's the end of my VSE Synergy presentation. Anybody have any questions? Want to see anything? You want me to try to do a re-IPL we can try it.
Yeah, I've been asked if I could make that happen, so I was interested to see if.
We'll see what happens. I'll do it. I'll do it. So I'm going to do a VSE command. And let's just try to re-IPL 240. Let's see. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you for being here.